Well, the issue of domestic violence has been in the news pretty constantly for the past couple of years, but especially over the last month after that horrific murder-suicide in Brisbane, the funeral held just yesterday. And the Queensland Liberal National Party opposition is proposing a new package of domestic violence measures to take to the state election there later this year. I'm joined now by the Deputy Opposition Leader, Tim Mander. Thanks for joining us, Tim. I want you to explain this package for us because it'll be of great interest, I think, to people right around the country, not only those in Queensland. First up, there's this idea. We're all familiar with these security bracelets or anklets that can be placed on offenders or people on parole. There's a suggestion that domestic violence offenders who have breached orders would not only have one of these bracelets or anklets put on them, but that their former partner would have a device that warns them, gives them an actual physical warning if they're approaching. Explain to us where this has been trialled, how it would work, and who would get access to this technology.
Well, thanks, Chris. Well, look, millions of dollars have been invested into preventing domestic violence, and we're still seeing tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. So what we wanted to see are some practical things that can protect particularly women. So we want to look at personal safety devices. So as you've mentioned, GPS trackers on those that have perpetuated domestic violence in the past and have breached DVO. That's not a new idea, but what hasn't been trialled in this country is a warning device that goes to the victims. So what that would be is that, of course, they would wear something, a watch or have a personal device which warned them that their partner, who has breached a DVO in the past, comes within a certain distance of them so that they could take some evasive action if that's what was required. This has been trialled, or not just trialled, it's been used around the world in a number of countries. It's been used in Spain. At the moment, there's 1,500 couples that have these GPS trackers and warning devices. And I'm told that in the 10 years that they've had them in Spain, there's not been one domestic homicide with couples that have had these devices. So I think it's something that's practical, something that will really give the warnings that are required. And because often people are just attacked unexpectedly, as we saw just a couple of weeks ago, so tragically up here in Queensland. We want to trial 200 of these devices, and we think they're worth a go.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it looks worth a go. I mean, nothing's ever going to be completely foolproof when you're given some of the psychos that we've had to deal with, but this seems like another layer of protection and of peace of mind that victims would be able to get access to.
That's right. Look, we also want to overhaul the domestic violence criminal justice framework in general. There's a few other things that we need to look at as well. If you talk to domestic violence lobby groups and representative groups, they'll talk about the definition of strangulation. They say that that needs to be reinforced, needs to be clarified, because too many blokes get away with this when they're charged with it in the courts. We also want to look at a new charge of coercive powers. So this is happening in the UK at the moment. So this is when a perpetrator has had these controlling sort of behaviour over their partner, whether it's financial control, whether it's control about their whereabouts or control about who they mix with. These are all red flags to violence later, and we think that we need to look at that as well.
This is a fascinating area, a fascinating topic, because, Tim Mander, a lot of people, a lot of the experts talk about this, and I think most of us might have seen a bit of this around us, this idea of coercive control, this idea of the control of a partner being a red flag, being an outward sign, if you like, of something more sinister in the relationship or in the makeup of that person. Now, how do you define coercive control, and how do you demonstrate it before a court?
That's part of the challenge, Chris, as we go forward with this. So we're asking for a review to be done so that we can look at this more closely. We can have a look at where it's worked in other jurisdictions. I believe that it has worked in the United Kingdom and having some impact. And of course, it's got to be proven in a court of law. But again, if you talk to all those that are experts in this area, they say that this is an absolute red flag when this behaviour occurs constantly to more violent behaviour later on. And I think it's worth a look at it again to do anything we can to prevent this scourge from continuing.
So let's look at this, how it would practically play out. There might be a woman who's in fear for her safety, but might not be able to refer to any physical abuse, but could say that her behaviour is controlled with threats in certain ways. Anger if she leaves the house, anger if she talks to other men, whatever it is. And so you're saying if you can demonstrate that but before a court, even without the physical violence, you might be able to get the sort of restraining order or domestic violence control order that would give peace of mind.
That's exactly right, Chris. So we're hearing of examples of extreme violence against a partner that leads to death, and that is the first example of violence taking place. So there's been these other controlling behaviours before that. So if a partner, in the main it's normally a woman, feels that they're in this situation where they're being totally controlled in every aspect of their life, how they spend their money, who they mix with, whether they're allowed to see their family, where they go, all this type of behaviour, that would be evidence in the court of law that would, could land or end with a charge of coercive behaviour. The other thing, Chris, that we want to look at is we want to give more power to the police here in Queensland with regards to domestic violence as well. It's quite cumbersome at the moment when police officers go to an incident. They can be tied up for 4 to 6 hours because they've got to go to the courts to get domestic violence orders. What we propose under this review is looking at giving powers to police to be able to issue those domestic violence orders on the spot, like they do with any other charge, as they come across evidence in front of them.
So
this would help them.
Yeah, they could issue a domestic violence order on the spot, and if there's any disagreement about that, it can be challenged in court later, presumably.
And this is no different than any other charge that they might make in the normal course of business, but domestic violence has been different. And particularly in regional areas, we hear stories where they have to travel a couple of 100 kilometres to get to a court, which takes up an enormous amount of police time, but of course also leaves the victim unprotected. So again, this would be part of a suite of changes that we would introduce if we're fortunate enough to be in power after the election later this year.
Sounds like a very innovative package. Tim, thanks for sharing it with us.
You're welcome.